heard this story from Mike, an old truck driver. He told it calmly, like it was nothing unusual. And that somehow made it worse. One full night, he was driving down a remote highway. Rain was pouring, the asphalt shining like glass, wipers barely keeping up, the radio hissing with static, his cigarette damp between his lips. The road was empty. Then he saw someone on the side of the road. The headlights caught him. Tall, wearing a long coat, an old-fashioned hat, a suitcase at his feet. He raised his hand, calm and steady. Mike figured the guy must have missed a bus. Slowed down, opened the door. The man got in without a word. Didn't even nod. There was a smell about him. Damp earth, like a cellar or freshly turned soil. They drove on. 10 minutes. Silence. Then Mike asked, "How far are you headed?" The passenger answered quietly, his voice dull, like it was coming through an old telephone line. "Into the city, though I left it a long time ago. A very long time." Silence again. After about 20 minutes, Mike glanced in the rearview mirror and noticed something wrong. The man's coat was completely dry, not a drop on it, even though the rain was coming down in sheets, and his eyes, glassy, fixed, not blinking. Mike looked back at the road and then heard a voice behind him. "Don't look in the mirror." He flinched. "What?" "Don't look," the man repeated even quieter. "That's not me." Mike couldn't help it. He looked and saw someone else sitting in the back seat, a shape like smoke, darker than the night itself. The face blurred, impossible to make out. At that moment, headlights from an oncoming car flashed across the cab, and the passenger was gone. Just gone. All that remained on the seat was a damp imprint and a small piece of an old ticket, a bus ticket, dated November 3rd, 1987. Since that night, Mike says he never picks anyone up on the road, not even if someone's standing there, waving, with a suitcase beside them. They say there's a stretch of Highway 36 where it's always deserted, day or night. The asphalt is smooth, dense forest presses in from both sides, and cell service disappears for miles. A truck driver once drove through there late at night, hauling cargo. Fog crawled along the road, headlights cutting through the white haze. Exhausted, barely keeping his eyes open, he noticed a woman standing on the shoulder. She wore a white headscarf and raised her hand. He figured you don't leave someone stranded in a place like that, so he pulled over. She got into the cab and said nothing. She looked young, but her face was hidden, either by shadow or the scarf. Out of habit, he asked where she was headed. Her voice was quiet, distant, as she said, "To the bridge." They drove in silence. Then the cab filled with cold, his breath turning to fog, even though the heater was on. He glanced at the mirror. She was there. He looked again, and his blood ran cold. The scarf was gone, and there was no face at all, just empty mist. He swerved, nearly losing control, slammed the brakes. He turned. The seat was empty. Only a damp mark remained on the floor mat, like melted snow. The next morning at a gas station, he told other drivers. They said she always asks for a ride to the bridge. 10 years ago, a semi crashed there, and a woman died. Since then, she appears at night. Anyone who picks her up feels freezing the whole way, and anyone who takes her to the bridge soon faces misfortune. Ever since, drivers speed through that stretch and keep their eyes on the road. This happened in the winter of 1993. Times were tense back then. I had a brand new car and needed to drive to Chicago in the middle of the night. The temperature was well below zero. I made a firm decision not to stop for anyone. People disappeared on highways back then, even over old cars. The road was empty. Cell phones were rare. Then a thought entered my mind. Not a voice, just a thought. You'll pass the turn, then another one, and there will be a car with hazard lights, and you will stop. I argued with myself, thinking there was no way. I kept driving. One turn, then another, and ahead, blinking lights. It was a semi-truck. A figure waved frantically. I told myself I wouldn't stop, and still hit the brakes. The driver ran over, followed by a woman holding a bundle. Inside was a newborn baby. The truck's engine had seized. They were freezing and terrified. I drove them home. The woman was crying, but the baby was fine. She asked for my name. Years later, I understood. That night, she was praying the way only a mother can, and I was forced to stop. I call it a miracle. No angels, no visions, but a real one. They say there's an unnamed bus stop at mile 55 on a rural highway. An old, rusted shelter where buses never stop. At night, someone sometimes stands there, and if you pull over, you won't leave the same. A truck driver nicknamed Nail was driving through on a freezing winter night. The road was empty, the radio crackling with static. At mile 55, he saw the shelter and a woman standing beside it. No hat, a long coat, a bag in her hand. He slowed down and asked if she needed help. She didn't answer, only slowly pointed toward the forest. There, in the snow, a red light flickered. He walked over and found a car in the ditch. No one inside, just a child's toy and a woman's scarf. When he turned back, the shelter was gone. He climbed into the truck and saw the woman sitting in the passenger seat, still, cold, not quite alive. He jumped out, caught his breath, opened the door again. The seat was empty, but a clear handprint remained on the glass from the inside, and from the radio came a whisper, mile 55. Don't drive past. He never took that road again. But sometimes at night, he thinks he sees a woman's face in the mirror. There are two kinds of people in this world. Those who believe in road legends, and those who simply haven't driven a lonely highway at night. Back in the late 90s, I belonged to the second group. I didn't believe in ghosts wandering along the roadside, or phantom hitchhikers, or strange warnings supposedly sent by the road itself. What I believed in was the suspension of my old car, a full tank of gas, and my own attention behind the wheel. That belief lasted until one night when a remote highway erased the line between the real and the impossible, and taught me a lesson far scarier than any robbery. November 1999. I was driving back from a long trip after delivering a shipment of hard-to-find auto parts to a remote northern town. The money from the deal was hidden in my car, some inside the door panels, some inside the spare tire. In those days, we called trips like that business runs, but in truth, every mile was a gamble with luck. The highway itself wasn't really a road. It was a test, hundreds and hundreds of miles of wilderness, where asphalt appeared only in short, deceptive stretches. Most of the time, the road was nothing but broken dirt. which after rain turned into sticky mud capable of swallowing even heavy trucks. I left the town at sunrise, hoping to cross the worst part before nightfall. I didn't make it. Twice my car sank deep into ruts. Twice I had to dig myself out. By the time darkness came, I finally reached a patch of damaged asphalt. There had been no gas stations, no houses, no people, for hundreds of miles. The 20 liters of gasoline left in my spare can didn't smell like freedom anymore. They smelled like fear. Night fell completely. Outside the car was a cold so deep it felt almost cosmic. And the silence, not peaceful silence, but heavy, crushing silence. The kind where it feels like you've been dropped into a soundproof chamber at the bottom of an endless well. My headlights carved out a narrow tunnel in the darkness. Broken pavement, crooked mile markers, and an endless wall of thin northern forest pressing in from both sides of the road. By that point, I had been driving for more than 15 hours. My body felt numb, like it was no longer mine, just an extension of the steering wheel. My eyelids were getting heavy. Every so often I stopped the car, stepped outside, breathed the freezing air, stretched my legs. But the moment I got back into the warm cabin, the steady rhythm of the road started pulling me towards sleep again. So I cracked the window open. A stream of icy air rushed inside, smelling of pine trees and frozen earth. To stay awake, I started yelling, singing dirty songs, reciting old poems, sometimes just howling at the darkness. If anyone had seen me, they probably would have thought I was losing my mind. But it worked. Fear kept the adrenaline pumping. Fear of falling asleep. Fear of stopping in the middle of nowhere. Fear that someone might step out of the darkness with a gun. The speedometer showed about 50 miles per hour. On that road, that was practically suicidal. Waves in the pavement could throw the car into a ditch. One deep pothole could destroy the suspension. But driving slower meant spending even more time in that frozen nightmare. Then, on a long, straight stretch of road, I noticed something. At first, only in the rearview mirror. A dense patch of darkness on the road behind me. My first thought was simple. A car with its headlights off. Sometimes criminals did that. They would approach from behind in total darkness, forcing the victim to panic and swerve off the road. I tensed, but the shadow wasn't moving like a car. It was catching up too fast, too smoothly, as if it were being pulled forward by an invisible cable. And then I realized it wasn't a car. I couldn't take my eyes off the mirror. In the dim red glow of my tail lights, the shadow began to take shape. Tall, two-legged. It was already only a few yards behind the car, running along the edge of the road. A person. The thought was so absurd my blood seemed to freeze. Who would run here? At night? In this cold? In the middle of nowhere? But the shadow made one final burst of speed, pulled alongside the car, and suddenly stepped into the beam of my headlights. It was a man, tall, wearing a dirty padded jacket and a worn winter hat, and he was running. But the speed was impossible. His legs were moving so fast they blurred together. He wasn't just running. He was moving as fast as the car itself. Within seconds he passed me. And then he turned his head. Suddenly, his neck twisted at an unnatural angle. My headlights lit up a pale face. Hollow eyes sunk deep in shadow. He looked straight at me, then raised his hand and wagged a finger, like someone warning a reckless driver. Slow down. My mind snapped. My foot lifted off the gas by itself. I stared at the figure ahead of me as it disappeared into the darkness. Then the car engine coughed. I shifted down automatically and entered the same curve where the running man had vanished. I came out of the turn and slammed the brakes. Right across the narrow lane lay a massive wooden spool of heavy electrical cable. If I had kept my speed, I would have crashed into it at full force. I dragged the thing off the road and kept driving. Only a couple of miles later did a terrifying thought hit me. If that man ran ahead of me, how did he see the spool first? Why did he wag his finger? So I would slow down. I made it home that night running on pure adrenaline. Later, I told the story in a garage, laughing it off. An old truck driver everyone called Grandpa listened quietly. Then he said, "That wasn't a hallucination. Old roads sometimes do that. When enough blood has soaked into the asphalt, strange things happen. Sometimes the road warns you. If you see a man running, a dog, something strange, hit the brakes. It might be your last chance." Back then I didn't believe him, but now I know one thing. If you ever see a man running faster than your car along an empty highway at night, don't think, just brake, because the road might be warning you. I've been driving a rig for 20 years. The road is my home, my life. I've seen things out there, bad wrecks, strange people, weather that could kill a man. But there was always an explanation, something logical, something rational. Until that night, until Highway M117. There's a stretch of road truckers called the Quiet Run. Most of us avoid it, and I usually do too. But that time I couldn't afford the 300-mile detour. The deadline was tight. At first nothing seemed wrong. It just got quieter. The engine of my semi, normally roaring like a beast, suddenly started whispering. The sound of the tires on asphalt faded into a faint hiss. At first I even liked it. Driving in silence can feel peaceful. But then I realized something wasn't right. The silence felt flat, like it had no depth. I turned on the radio. The speakers crackled. The music sounded like it was coming from inside a tin can. Thin, metallic, stripped of any richness. I shut it off, and the silence came back, heavy, unnatural. I glanced at the trees along the road. The forest stood like a wall, a normal forest at night, except it didn't feel normal. The trees looked like they were drawn on cardboard, no depth, no perspective. My headlights lit the highway ahead, but the light felt weak. It didn't cut through the darkness. It only slid across the surface. Then I saw a mile marker, Highway M117, mile 82. I remember it clearly, because about 30 minutes later I saw it again. The same marker, mile 82. I hadn't turned, hadn't stopped. My heart skipped. The road kept going. The forest kept going. And the flat silence stayed with me. I stared into the darkness, trying to find any movement. An animal, another car, anything. But there was nothing. Only those unmoving cardboard trees. And the silence. It began pressing against my ears, almost physically. Even my thoughts started to feel flat. My emotions faded. The fear was there, but distant. Like I was watching myself from the outside. Like a movie. I could see the truck driver getting scared, but I couldn't actually feel the fear. That's when I saw them. Not right away. At first, they were just distortions at the edge of my vision, like static on an old television screen. Then they began to take shape, or something close to a shape, They were figures, tall, unnaturally thin, like silhouettes cut from black paper. They stood between the trees along the road, completely still. They had no faces, no arms, no legs, just outlines. But something about them was wrong. Their geometry made no sense. My brain struggled to process what I was seeing, and yet I could see them clearly. Strangely, I wasn't afraid. It felt like someone had switched off the emotional center of my brain. All that remained was observation, recording. The figures didn't move, but I knew they could see me, sense me. They belonged to that flat reality. They were part of it. I drove past them. They disappeared behind me. But a few minutes later, I saw them again. The same figures, standing in the same places. And there it was again. Mile marker 82. The road had looped. I was trapped. I stopped the truck and stepped out of the cab. The air was perfectly still, cold, without any smell. I looked down at my hand. It didn't feel like mine. It looked flat, almost two-dimensional. I pinched my skin. There was almost no pain, only pressure. The figures stood in the forest, closer now. I could feel their attention, cold, indifferent, like a scientist studying an insect. I climbed back into the cab and started the engine. The sound was barely there, just a thin vibration. I pressed the gas. The truck began to move, slowly, reluctantly, as if it was sinking into something invisible. Miles stretched endlessly. The marker that said 82 kept appearing again and again. The figures watched me pass, with whatever they had instead of eyes. Eventually, I lost track of time, and at some point, I realized something. They were waiting, or maybe I was. The boundary between me and that flat world was getting thinner. I could feel reality draining away, feel myself becoming flatter and flatter, part of that cardboard landscape, part of that endless loop. Then a thought came to me, simple and completely insane. If the world had become flat, maybe it needed depth again, sound, chaos. My hand found the horn, and I slammed it. The blast tore through the flat silence. The sound was distorted, rattling, but it was sound, and it ripped the unnatural smoothness apart. The world jerked. The image trembled, like someone violently shaking an old film reel. The figures by the road flickered. Their outlines began to blur. I kept pressing the horn, holding it down. The truck roared like a wounded animal. Then suddenly the headlights flared brighter. They cut through the darkness, giving depth back to the trees, to the road. The forest seemed to pull away. The figures vanished. The silence exploded into normal night sounds. Crickets, wind in the branches, a distant dog barking. My engine roared again, loud, powerful, alive. I passed another marker, mile 95. The road stretched forward again. The loop was broken. I drove without stopping until I saw the lights of a gas station ahead. Bright, real, three-dimensional. I climbed out of the cab, shaking. The world felt deafeningly loud, painfully bright, overwhelmingly real. I never told anyone about that night. Who would believe it? They'd say I fell asleep at the wheel, hallucinations. But I know what happened. I was there, on the quiet run, in a world without depth. Since then, I hear things differently, see things differently. Sometimes, when everything becomes too quiet, I feel like the world starts flattening again. Shadows stretch longer, thinner, and somewhere at the edge of my vision, those black figures flicker again. I don't drive at night anymore, and I always take the long way around, even if it adds 1,000 miles, because there are roads that don't lead forward, They lead nowhere, into a flat, silent emptiness. And if you ever end up there, there's no guarantee you'll make it back, and even less chance you'll come back the same. I paid my price for taking the short road. A part of me stayed there. At mile 82 of Highway M117, in that world of cardboard trees and silent figures, and sometimes that part of me calls me back, in a quiet, flat whisper. A whisper only I can hear. This story was told to me by a man who, after that night, never drove winter highways alone again. Not even during the day. Not even if he was in a hurry. He spoke calmly, without any strain, and that made it far more unsettling. Holiday season, somewhere up north. Temperatures dropping below -40. A night so dark the headlights felt like they were pressing against a solid wall of black. There were two of them in the truck, the driver and his partner. The road was empty. The radio hissed. No signal for miles. For hundreds of miles, no towns, no gas stations. And then, in the headlights, they saw a man. He was standing on the side of the road, not running, not waving frantically, just raising his hand, calmly, like he knew they would stop. No hat, no gloves, an old jacket, not meant for that kind of cold. I told him right away, something's off about that guy, the driver said later. But out there, you don't leave people behind. He got into the back seat, didn't say thank you, didn't ask where they were going. Just one word. Straight. At first, everything was quiet. The passenger sat upright, hands on his knees. Sometimes he smiled slightly, not with his lips, but somehow with his whole face. After a while, the driver noticed something strange. The cab was warm, but from the back seat, there was cold, not a draft, real cold, like an open freezer. His partner leaned closer and whispered, "Do you hear that? He's not breathing." Inside the truck, you could hear everything. The engine, the crunch of snow under the tires, even the plastic clicking as it cooled. But from the back, nothing. No breath, no movement. The worst moment came when the driver glanced at the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty. He turned around sharply. The man was there, sitting still, looking straight ahead. That's when I realized mirrors don't lie, he said, which means he wasn't fully here. A few miles later, the passenger spoke again. "There used to be a road here," he said, "an old winter road." The driver knew the place. There had been a route there once. It was shut down years ago after a series of accidents. Strange ones. Trucks were found intact, but the drivers were gone. "We're not going the right way," the passenger suddenly said. "You turned." And right then, the engine died. The truck stopped, the headlights flickered, and went out. In total darkness, the driver heard the door open, a slow, heavy creak. No one stepped out. The door just opened and then closed. When they turned their flashlights on, the back seat was empty. Frost covered the upholstery, and on the floor, wet footprints, like someone had just come in from the cold. The tracks led to the door, and then they stopped. Another truck driver found them at dawn. Old, grey-haired, hands cracked from the cold. He listened in silence, then made the sign of the cross and said, "You gave a ride to the road one." Turns out, people up north have known about it for a long time. They call it different names. The Traveller, the Winter One, the one in between. They say these are the ones who died on the road in extreme cold. Not frozen, just left behind to wait. It shows up during the holidays, when the line between the living and the dead gets thinner. It doesn't kill you right away. It just rides with you. And if you take it where it wants to go, you might not come back. The old man said the mirror saved them. As long as you saw it, it couldn't stay, he explained. It doesn't like being noticed. Before leaving, he added, if you see someone on the road during the holidays, check the mirror before you open the door. After that, the driver kept finding strange things in his truck. Frost on the inside of the windows, damp footprints on the floor. Sometimes, the smell of cold water. And on holiday nights, he still hears it. A quiet voice from the darkness. Straight. I never believed in dead zones. All my life I thought it was superstition. Something people made up to explain human error or coincidence. Until I, and people I know, became part of one of those coincidences. Or rather, a chain of them. Now, whenever I drive that stretch of highway up north, I slow down, grip the wheel tighter, and watch the road carefully. Because I know that road doesn't just lead forward. Sometimes it slips somewhere else, into a quiet, invisible pocket of another reality, where things happen that shouldn't happen at all. But they do, again and again. There's a stretch of road beyond the last small town. After a few miles, the forest suddenly closes in from both sides, like massive black curtains. This isn't a scenic forest, it's a wall, dense, dark, pressing right up against the asphalt. It's not even that long, but when you drive into it, especially in the fall, at dusk, time feels wrong. Your headlights don't light the way. They just slide along the trees like tunnel walls, and you can almost feel it. The space behind you closing, cutting you off from everything you just left. On the left side, just past the tree line, there's an old wooden cross leaning inside a crooked fence. It's weathered, grey from years of rain. Locals say a motorcyclist died there a long time ago. After that, things started happening. Every year, accidents, always there. The first time I noticed it, I was just a passenger looking out the window, and I saw it. A car lying on its side in the ditch, just a few yards from that cross. Skid marks stretched across the asphalt, stopping just short of it, like someone had twisted the wheel at the last second, trying not to hit it. I remember thinking, lightning doesn't strike twice. A year later, late fall, I was driving back in complete darkness. As I approached that same place, I saw flashing lights. Something in my chest tightened. The scene looked unreal. Long logs scattered across the road, fallen from a logging truck. A crushed SUV slammed into them, and on the roadside, a massive wild boar. The drivers said it came out of nowhere. A swerve, brakes, the load shifted, then impact. Vehicles wrecked, the animal dead, people alive, lucky. My turn came a couple of weeks later, early morning. Just before the forest, a hare shot out from under my wheels, too fast to react. A dull hit and a sharp crack. I pulled over. The animal didn't move, and neither did my fog light. Gone, completely knocked out. Nothing serious, just one of those small, irritating problems that sticks with you. Then my friend started having trouble. One car, a blown tire right there. Flat road, clean asphalt, and the tire shredded like it had been cut open. A year later, the same thing, different car, same spot. freezing cold, ice everywhere, the jack slipping. 3 of us holding the car up so it wouldn't drop while the 4th changed the wheel. And the same thought kept repeating in my head. Again. Here. Again. On the right side of the road, where the forest pulls back a little, there's a low dip. There used to be a deep creek there. My grandfather remembered how, in spring, huge fish would come in to spawn. Now it's just an overgrown ditch, and beside it, the foundation of an unfinished house. It stood there for as long as I can remember. No roof, empty window openings, like it had been abandoned halfway through. My grandfather said the man who built it wasn't right. Either he lost his mind during construction, or he was never quite there to begin with. He died before finishing it. The house was taken apart, and all that remained was the foundation, like a bone pushing up through the ground. One day, I was driving my grandfather past that place and told him everything. He listened quietly, looking out the window, then said, "Old folks used to say, something lived near that creek." I brushed it off, but he looked at me calmly and added, "Maybe stories, maybe not. This place isn't good, never was." I asked why he never told me before. He just said, "No need to scare you, but watch the road there. It doesn't like people rushing through. It reminds you when you least expect it." That same fall, another story came up. A truck driver told it at a roadside diner. Late at night, in light fog, he had just come out of the forest, and suddenly, in his headlights, something stepped out from that foundation. Not a person, a shadow, black, faceless, but shaped like one. It stood right in his lane. He slammed the brakes, the truck swerved, nearly rolled. When he got out, there was nothing there, just the moon and the concrete. I listened to that story, and I didn't smile anymore, because everything connected. One chain, one strange pattern. The place remembers, the creek, the house, the deaths. It doesn't forgive. First it gives you small problems, then worse. And if you still don't understand, it shows itself. Maybe it's all just coincidence. Bad road, tired drivers, weather. I want to believe that. I really do. But now, every time I approach that stretch, I slow down, turn on all my lights, and watch not just the road, but that dark rectangle of concrete, just in case. Because dead zones aren't always stories. Sometimes they're fractures in reality itself, and sometimes something comes through. I once encountered what I can only describe as a phantom car, and only by pure luck did I avoid something irreversible. I was just inches away from a collision. It was early morning, the kind of hour when the city is only just beginning to wake up. The streets were empty, no cars, no people, and for some reason, I had to be out driving that early. I was pulling out of a driveway onto a long, straight residential street, one that you can clearly see in both directions for quite a distance. Like anyone would, I looked left, then right. The road was completely empty. I had barely started moving, when suddenly, from the left, something came straight at me, fast. A car, grey, low, wide, with a shape that didn't look quite right. I had never seen anything like it before, and I haven't since. Its windows weren't just tinted, they were completely opaque, matte, like there was nothing behind them at all. You couldn't see inside, not even a silhouette. It appeared out of nowhere. I slammed on the brakes. The car didn't slow down, didn't swerve, didn't react. It shot past me, just inches from my hood. I froze, heart pounding, then instinctively turned my head to follow it and stopped because it was gone. The street was empty again, exactly like it had been seconds before. There was nowhere it could have gone, no turns, no driveways, no time to disappear. And yet, it vanished just as suddenly as it appeared, from nowhere into nowhere. About a month later, I told a friend about it. He listened, then went quiet, really quiet. And then he said the same thing had happened to him. Same car, same color, same impossible windows. Only difference, his street was a dead end. There was absolutely nowhere for that car to go, unless it never needed to go anywhere at all. The night was thick, like spilled tar. The headlights of an old car pulled fragments of wet asphalt out of the darkness, shining faintly after the rain. The wipers dragged across the windshield in an uneven rhythm, and with every movement, it felt like something flickered in the rearview mirror. At first, the driver, a man in his 40s, heading home along an empty highway, thought it was just his imagination, fatigue, tricks of the light. But then, he saw it again. Something moved in the headlights, a shape, like a person. No, not a person. Too fast, too wrong. He pressed the gas. The engine responded with a low growl, the speed climbing higher. And the shadow was running after him, right there on the highway, at first far away, then closer, closer. Its movements were unnatural, jerky, like every bone in its body was broken, bending in ways it shouldn't. The driver glanced into the rearview mirror and instantly regretted it. Right behind him, just a short distance away, the figure was gaining. Its eyes glowed with a pale, lifeless light. Its mouth hung open, but there was no sound, no breath, only the sound of bare feet hitting wet asphalt. Slap, slap, slap. He floored the gas. The car roared, speed climbing higher and higher. But it didn't fall behind. If anything, it was getting closer. Closer with every second. Just a little more, and it would reach the car, climb onto it, and then, for a split second, the headlights revealed its face, and something inside him broke, because it was his face, his own, twisted into an unnatural smile, like a reflection in a warped mirror. The driver screamed, yanked the wheel. The car spun off the road, metal screamed, glass shattered. The last thing he saw before his head hit the steering wheel was the figure, no longer running, standing right next to the shattered window, looking straight into his eyes. Then, silence. The highway was empty again, and only the rain kept falling, washing away the footprints of bare feet from the asphalt.